Welcome to the Atheist Podcast. I'm Erin.
And I'm Kelley. Atheist is where we will explore American cultural trends through the lenses of a devout theist
And a devout atheist. We will discuss the messiness of being human.
the latest in social science, psychology, and American culture.
And what any of it has to do with Homo sapiens' longtime preoccupation with religion.
Hey, Erin.
Hey, Kelley, what's going on?
This is a kind of exciting day.
Yeah? What's up?
What's up? So, Justin just reminded us that this episode is coming out on July 1st,
Yeah.
which is our 1-year anniversary.
Woo woo.
We've been doing this for a
I
year.
know, isn't that wild?
That's crazy.
I mean, in a way, more than a year, because we recorded a lot before we actually even started releasing. So it's
Yeah.
been like a year and a half.
Yeah. Super exciting. And I've got to say, for 3 sevens, which we're going to talk about today, for 3 of us who are all sevens to do something consistently for a year, that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So today we keep referencing this, and we haven't really talked about it. So we thought we're going to do a little Enneagram episode.
Yep.
On the Enneagram of personality, and kind of talk about what we mean by that. When we talk about Enneagram, we talk about these numbers, and so I'm going to kind of give a little overview.
Yeah. It's super, super exciting. Kelley is an expert when it comes to the Enneagram. I've been to her. She does sessions. So if you want to book her to come to your house and like with a group of people.
I actually will come to your house. Sure. I'll go anywhere, or you can come to my house, whatever. But yeah. Yeah, and I would say, I don't know if I would consider myself an expert, but I have worked with a lot of experts, and
Okay.
I'm definitely like.
Well, tell us about your training a little bit.
Sure. So I got very interested in the Enneagram maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, and started reading some books and went on a retreat with person who has written a couple of books. Chris Hewart's wrote the book, The Sacred Enneagram and The Enneagram of Belonging, which I really love those books. I think they're really brilliant. And so I did a retreat with him and learned a lot from him, worked with him pretty close, went on actually probably several retreats, and worked with him one-on-one in learning about the Enneagram and as like a wisdom tradition.
Okay.
And then through Chris's work, I was introduced to a woman named Marianne Gilbert, who's out in California, and then I've done several workshops with her, and then I've been part of her cohort, kind of the first cohort that she's training of people to do what's called the somatic Enneagram.
Okay.
So that is based on the work of Peter Levine, somatic experiencing, which is a way of kind of processing trauma. And somatic experiencing often is used as kind of as a base practice, and it's often paired with something else. And so in the work that Marianne does, she's paired it with the Enneagram, and it works really, really well. So that's kind of the training I've gotten, and I'm kind of going to jump back into it now. Now that I'm
retired.
That I'm retired. So I've taken kind of some time off from it.
Not really retired, just a new
Rewired.
Yeah.
Somebody said that to me before, and I was like, oh, I like that. Not retired, rewired. So there is a lot here. So, and we're probably just I don't want to just like talk at you.
Yeah.
So,
I'm going to try to ask questions.
Yeah, you can ask questions.
Be curious.
But this will just be like a little toe dip, and then we can, maybe revisit another time. But so the Enneagram, and we'll have maybe on the website, we'll have the Enneagram, the symbol of the Enneagram,
Okay.
which is kind of an ancient symbol. And it looks a little weird. Like you look at it and you're like, oh my God, is that like a satanic image? What is happening? So some people are freaked out by it. But it's basically, if you go to the website and look at it, it's like a triangle within a circle,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's like a hexad, and there's 9 numbers on the circle.
Mm-hmm.
Starting at the top of the circle is a 9, and it goes all the way around. And then these numbers are all connected to 2 other numbers. So that's kind of hard to visualize. So I would look it up if you're listening right now. The way a lot of people think of the Enneagram as like an ancient tradition, the Enneagram has really only been around since the 60s, and I'll kind of tell you a little bit about the story.
Yeah, where that originate.
Yeah. So, but the wisdom the person who kind of developed the ideas around the Enneagram is a man named Oscar Icazo, and South American kind of wisdom teacher, seeker, psychologist, and he was a seeker himself and pulled from a lot of different wisdom traditions, including kind of Platonic ideas of like the Platonic ideas, and then how they translated into, say, like mystical Christianity and the Desert Mothers and Fathers, and then also Kabbalah and mystical Judaism. But then the way that he kind of blended things, he came up with this system. And people came down to South America to study with him. And one of the people that studied with him was a man named Claudio Naranjo. And when Claudio learned from him, he then brought it back to the United States, and he was a Gestalt therapist, and he was teaching at Berkeley. And so in like this, I think late 60s, early 70s, he was teaching there. And it was interesting. There was a group of people that were kind of part of that school of kind of therapy and who were interested in kind of self-realization. You know, there was 60s and 70s, and that was a thing, you know, awakening and self-awareness. And so there was a group of people that were kind of studying with him and for that. And then there was also a group of, I don't know if they were just specifically Jesuit priests, but they were all there was different Catholic priests and friars and spiritual directors who were also studying. Yeah. And so it's actually really a well-known typology within the Catholic Church.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so it's very interesting. But when it was taught, so like Richard Rohr wrote a big book on the Enneagram.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he wrote one, and there's a ton of books.
What's his angle on it? Like, what was he communicating about it?
Well, he goes into each of the 9 types and kind of explains what each of the 9 types are, and it goes into a lot of complexity. There's a lot of kind of sin language because it goes into these Platonic ideas, like it goes into like the 7 deadly sins.
Oh,
and then with the 2 more thrown in for good measure.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of kind of sin language around it, and so there's these ideas of like the holy ideas. So like a higher self, and then like a fixated self. There are the virtues. There are the passions, and the passions, the language for passions are more like around sin, right? The passion is a sin.
Okay, yeah.
So there's each of those for each type. And so what Icazo was trying to kind of identify and systematize was kind of how ego structures are created to kind of protect the wounded soul. And that they come out in these kind of 9 archetypal ways.
Okay.
And then not only how they kind of come out in these 9 archetypal ways, but then how these structures, these personality structures, are actually connected to each other too. Mm-hmm. So, and that's what the symbol is kind of really used for, because each of the types are connected to 2 other symbols, and then they're also connected on either side on the circle.
Yeah.
There are ways that where we go kind of as our best self, as our unhealthy self, to other kind of personality types. So, for example, sevens, we are connected to both the 5, which is a type that is very kind of analytical, very solitary. They are very protective of their energy. And 7s are very energetic, go, 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 want to go all the time. And so when 7s go to 5, they kind of slow down.
Yeah.
They feel much more comfortable in solitude.
Yeah.
They become much less kind of reactive and busy, and they
So that's the
become
healthy.
kind of more thoughtful, and so that's the healthy
expression
of
Right.
that type. And then we also go to 1, which is the perfectionist. And so often when we're not in a healthy place, we can go to a place where we start to really become very black and white in our thinking, very
Yeah.
judgmental.
Yeah.
We kind of can get down on ourselves,
Yeah.
and we can kind of be pretty judgmental of others too. And I see that in myself a lot.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
The perfectionist. So my son, he's got like, as we're recording this, he's got like 3 more days of school left.
Yeah.
And he was like, so is my goal to get all A+ in all my classes. And he's like, and I think I'm going to do it. I just have to ace this like last test. Right. And I was like, you've heard of perfectionism, right? And he's like, yes, it's apparently a bad trait.
He's like, so I don't have that.
Yeah. No, he was kind of, I mean, he was like acknowledging. Like, yeah. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, and so I'll kind of go through kind of each type and just kind of give a little background on each.
So maybe it would be fun. Where would someone, if they wanted to do a test?
Yeah.
So if you're like, hey, I want to take a quiz online so I know which type I am, and then if you want to come back to the episode and be like, okay, now hear Kelley talk about the types. But
yeah, that would be a good idea. So for one thing, I would say is the tests are good in order to kind of narrow down like what type might I be.
Okay.
But you definitely want to read and learn about all the types, because this is not a test like Myers-Briggs where you take a test and then it tells you this is you.
Right.
And this is, I mean, I think there's really good things about the Myers-Briggs, but this is more like self-identified. Like you want to read about the types, and usually the type you are is the type that you go, ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh, that hurts a little bit.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So when you go,
that's it.
That sounds like me.
Okay.
That's usually you.
Okay.
So nobody should really tell you what type you are, and nobody should. So you shouldn't just like take a test and be like, that's what I am.
Yeah.
And so the test that I really like is the Riso-Hudson test. And it is on the Enneagram Institute page, and we can link it on the show notes. And so, the people. So Riso and Hudson, who Don Riso and Russ Hudson, who developed this test, are really real. I mean, they're the experts on the Enneagram, and what the test will do is it'll give you your top. It'll rank all 9 types, and it'll give you your scores for each one.
Yeah.
And then it'll give you really good descriptions of your top 3 choices, of your top 3 types, so that you can kind of read through, and it'll tell you about like what does this type look like, in a really healthy state, and then what does this type look like in a really unhealthy state.
Okay.
So you can kind of read those through, and then you decide like, this is where I kind of feel drawn.
Okay.
And you can also kind of, keep learning and start, you can go to an Enneagram coach, and you can kind of talk through things so that as you keep learning and becoming self-aware, because a lot of times, sometimes it's hard to even identify because we're just not that self-aware.
Yeah.
Or we can say, oh, a couple of those things, fit. But then, like, if you were to ask your partner would be like, oh no, that all fits.
Yeah.
Actually, like that fits good. So yeah. So I would say that would be the test. It's about $20, but totally worth it. Okay, you ready to go into them?
Yeah, let's do it. So type 1.
Okay, we're not going to start with type 1.
Oh,
we're actually going to start with type 8. So I know that's super random. So there are each of the 9 types. There are 3 types in each of the intelligence centers. So on the top of the diagram, so the 8, the 9, and the 1 are body types.
Okay.
And then the 2, 3, and the 4 are heart types, kind of the emotion center. And then the 5, 6, and 7s are head types, the thinking types. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah. So we start with 8 because 8 is the first type in the body type. So the 8 is the challenger, and the challenger. I have some notes here. It's kind of like that type is the type that really needs to assert control. And so they are almost compulsed to challenge. So if you come to an 8, like with an idea, they're always going to come back with like another idea, something else, or they might like tell you, what's wrong with your idea. And they're very assertive. They can be very reactive. The 8 and the 1 are both kind of the most intense of types.
I see. Okay.
And they really come from a place where vulnerability is dangerous. So they have to kind of keep these walls up in order to kind of move through the world.
Oh, okay. Can I make a reference to our last show? There was something that I forgot that I wanted to mention when we were talking about the anxious generation, if you listen to the last episode. But he talks about that our brains are either like in discover mode or defend mode.
Yeah.
And how, like, if you're in discover mode, you are a more open person, open to experiences. Things just don't seem as threatening. But if you're constantly trapped in defend mode, that the world is a scary place, vulnerability is scary. So that's an interesting, and it's also that like these ways of being can kind of be turned on or turned off, right? Depending on like your environment in a way, or like how you're interacting in the environment. So that kind of goes with
absolutely
going to certain numbers or whatever.
Yeah. And that would be, like the defend. So the defend place for the challenger would be this kind of like vengeance, challenging, like control, right? And then for the challenger, the holy idea is really innocence, like the thing that moves them out of that unhealthy space is that moves them into the space not of defending but of discovery, right? Is realizing that their own innocence, and which is almost like a childlike curiosity, right? And that a goodness. The 8s are people who, even though it sounds like like they might be assholes, it's really that they're fierce defenders of people who are vulnerable.
Okay.
So they are constantly like, they're really great people at doctors. I would think there would be a lot of 8s that are doctors, or people that work for nonprofits that work towards helping the poor. Just so they have a real sense of what is right and wrong, and that they are the people to kind of challenge the bullies. Yeah. So it's not that they're challenging, just but I mean they do kind of challenge everybody.
Yeah, but like in the way that we understand that human beings are nuanced and express their personalities in all kinds of different ways,
The
right?
Tolstoy
the
quote.
Tolstoy quote. Yeah.
Yeah, for all of these, there's a virtue and there's a shadow,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the eight's virtue is really, when they can tap into that sense of innocence, they're soft and absolutely tender-hearted
Yeah.
defenders of people who need defending.
Yeah.
So that's the 8. The 9 is the peacemaker.
Okay.
And the 9 is the type that, in order to make peace, that's their highest goal, is to kind of avoid conflict.
Okay.
So they want peace at all costs. So what they end up doing in order to create that peace is they kind of are self-forgetting. So they tend to merge with whoever is with them in order to kind of keep that peace, right?
Yeah.
So they're the people that are be like, well, what do you want for dinner?
Yeah.
Where do you want to go out
Yeah.
tonight? And so sometimes that can create a sense of kind of laziness. Sloth is their their passion, right? Their sin. And what that can also do, as they are self-forgetting, is they're kind of asleep to their own anger.
Yeah.
So they have a hard time expressing anger. If you're trying to think about whether you might be a 9 or not, rather than getting angry, 9s will fall asleep.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they'll go to sleep. So, and that's that kind of indolence, that kind of, but their kind of gift in this type is that they can walk into a room and they can immediately tell what is needed in this space, like how they need to fit into the space. So they can be very social. They're very people love 9s.
Yeah.
And they can they have this kind of chameleon quality to them.
Yeah.
So that is the 9. So then the last kind of body type is the.
And why is it a body type?
So the way that the body types kind of engage with the world is through their gut instincts.
Okay.
So they know things kind of through their bodies. Now, the other part of that is that the types that are in the middle of each of the intelligence centers that are also, they're kind of asleep to it. So even though the 9s have our body types, they also suppress their bodies.
Okay.
So for them to kind of move into a healthy space, they need to kind of reconnect with their bodies, right? So for the 9s, the thing is what is the next right step? What is active? What is my action that I should take in this, rather than kind of falling asleep and being lethargic?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So for the 1 is the perfectionist or the reformer. And the 1 is, and I kind of mentioned the 1 a little bit in reference to the 7s. The 1, their passion is anger and and their fixation is the things that they can kind of fixate on is resentment. That's because they're very black and white thinkers. They have a gift of knowing kind of what is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And they don't really think in nuance at all. So for them, it's so clear, this is the right choice, this is the right thing to do, that they can assume that everybody sees that this is the right choice and this is the right thing to do.
Right.
And so then when somebody doesn't see it, they don't understand it and they think they're just not doing it. And that's when they can get kind of resentful.
Got it. Okay.
So they can be kind of judgy, right? Like the 8s kind of are compulsed to challenge all the time. The 1s are kind of compulsed to criticize or critique.
Okay.
And my mother's a 1.
Yeah.
And so I'll I remember I would send her an essay that kids would write or a project that they would do. And it was and I could see her just she'd be like, do they want feedback?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, Mom, they don't. They just want their grandma to say, great job. Oh my God, you're brilliant. That's what they want. They do not want critique from you. They don't want to know what's wrong with it.
Oh my
But
gosh.
again, like that comes out of
Yeah.
a place of,
Yeah.
you
She's
know,
trying. She wants to be helpful. She can't help it. but
yeah,
it's-
she really. I mean, they can, and that's the other thing with these, right? Once you kind of know what your type is, your type structure, you want to be aware of it, so that you can be like, this is who I am. You know, take me or leave me.
Yeah.
It's so that you can become aware of these things, so that you can soften the edges and you can make another choice.
Yeah.
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 For as critical as they may seem to people, they are 10 times more critical of themselves.
Okay.
So there was a show a couple years ago, Physical on Showtime.
Yeah.
And it was about, it took place during the 80s. And this woman has an eating disorder, the main character. And it was kind of a dark comedy, but there was a narration over it. And you could hear this kind of self-talk that she was definitely a perfectionist, this self-talk that this perfectionist woman had. And it was just like the cruelest, most debilitating self-talk. And so there really needs to be the sense of compassion for them.
Yeah.
So when they can kind of move in to this place of kind of serenity, when things can be, when imperfect can be perfect enough, when they can realize that it doesn't have to be perfect, things can be messy, and they can be okay with that, and that's that serenity piece. That's where they can just really be at their best, and they can just be wise, right?
Yeah.
So that's the one. And so now we're moving into the heart types, the emotion-driven types.
So this is how the heart is how they experience the world.
The heart is how they experience the world. And they're heart-forward people. So the 2 is the helper, or the giver. And they really understand their way of being in the world, and the way they receive love is through helping others and through showing up. And we love 2s. We need 2s. Everybody needs a 2. The kind of the problem of the 2, and this is kind of interesting, but the passion, or the quote unquote sin, right, of the 2 is actually pride. And so what's kind of it's interesting is that the 2 will kind of show up sometimes, and when they're not needed, right? So they'll either think like, well, I'm the only person that can help in this way, or I know how to help best.
Yeah.
Right. So they're next to that 1.
Yeah.
So there's that sense of like, but I know.
Yeah.
And so for the 2, it's like, but I know how to help.
Yeah.
I know how to help in this space. And so oftentimes they can kind of show up and help in ways that maybe are not as helpful, or in ways that really need to allow agency for the person that they're helping. And that
can be almost like an enabling
kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. They want to just love deeply.
Yeah.
And there's an artist, he goes by kind of sleeping at last is what he records under.
Oh, yeah.
And he created a song for each Enneagram type, and you can find him on YouTube. And the song for the 2 makes me cry every single time. And it's just like, I will take the air out of my chest so that you can breathe. Like they want to give all of themselves. So kind of like the 9. So 9s and 2s can kind of mistype, because 9s will kind of sacrifice self, to create peace. 2s will sacrifice self in order to help others, right? So they'll kind of go, 2s are really hard. Like they're not great at asking for help themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And when there are things that they need, they'll kind of sacrifice their own needs for the needs of others. So what they need to really kind of step into is humility, and kind of knowing like, this isn't mine to do.
Yeah.
This is mine to just to kind of maybe just be in a space where somebody's suffering, and just to be there, and not necessarily need to fix it.
Yeah.
which is something we all, everybody struggles with. We all want to kind of make things better for people,
Yeah.
but it's really hard for a 2 to kind of just sit in a space of suffering with somebody without wanting to fix it in some way.
Yeah.
So that kind of help, can be enough.
Yeah.
And to be humble enough to say, like, my presence is enough.
Yeah.
Like what we learned from Betty and Kyle, right? Sometimes it's not even our presence. Sometimes we need to ask and say, do you want company in this space,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So to kind of be humble enough to say, to ask too.
Yeah.
So that's the 2.
Okay.
And the 2 goes to 8. So you can see how those are connected, right? Because the 8 wants to protect and to so 8 goes to 2 in health. And it can also go to 2 in not health, but and 2 can go to 8. So those two types are connected. So the next type is the 3. And so the 3, like the 9, represses that center. So the 3 kind of represses the heart center. So, and the 3 is the achiever. And so for them, there's a sense of, I receive love by being by being the best at things, by achieving things, by being looked at in a way that others admire and look up to.
Yeah.
And so their fixation is really vanity. They want to be the best. And they would rather deceive, like be inauthentic, than be not seen as the best.
Yeah.
So so their passion is kind of deceit. They'll kind of play the role of the successful person. And so for them to really move into a space of health is really authenticity and kind of owning kind of who they are. Like, what is real here? Like, who am I really? And can I be in that space? And the 3 and the 9 are connected. And that's kind of, the 3 can kind of pull from the 9 in that the 9 can kind of put others, right? And kind of, it doesn't have to be about me. It can be about you.
Yeah.
And so that's the 3s. But the 3's gift is that they are usually very successful people. And they're assertive. They're driven. They're kind of type A people. But they can be really competitive. So that's the 3.
Okay.
And then the last of the heart types are the 4. So the 4 and the 5 are down at the bottom of the chart. And so like the 1 and the 8 at the top of the chart, those are the most intense of types. The 4 and the 5 are the most kind of withdrawn of the types.
Okay.
The 4 is the individualist. And this is kind of like the 4 is like the tragic artist, the suffering artist.
Yeah.
And for the 4, the thing that identifies the 4 most is just the sense that, like we talked about the God-shaped hole in the last, like the 4 feels like there is like something missing. They always feel like there's something missing. And the kind of the thing about the 4 is like they also love that. Like their thing, their fixation is melancholy. They feel really kind of comfortable in this place of being sad. And so they don't want to be part of the group. They look at everybody over there and they're like, those people, basic, right? Like, I don't want to be a basic person. I want to be me. I want to be special.
Yeah.
So even though something's missing, that thing that's missing kind of makes them different. So they want to be that, but at the same time, they really want to be connected.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of a no-win. Like, if I'm part of the group, then I'm not special. But if I'm special, then I'm lacking.
Yeah.
So for them, their holy idea is holy origin. So kind of realizing and equanimity. So kind of learning that who they are and who they were kind of born to be is exactly who they should be.
Yeah.
And that there really is nothing missing, that they were, that what is good. So that's the 4. And then there's the 5, and the 5 is the.
So are we in?
Oh yeah. So
head
now we're in
types?
the head types.
Okay.
So these are the thinking types. So these are reasoning, very imaginative types, and they kind of lead with cognition. So the 5 might be the most head of the head types. They are kind of the scholar, the investigator. They're very withdrawn, internal, and they see the world as a very unpredictable place that basically sucks energy and resources from people. So they are very protective of their time, of their resources, of their energy. So they are usually very much introverts. You can be an extrovert and be a 5, but I would think, but they definitely need time alone.
Yeah.
And like, you don't want to just show up at a 5's house. They'll be like, "What are you doing here?"
Yeah.
Right. I remember my stepdaughter once. I remember I asked her. I was like, "Do you want to have like more friends over? Like you could have like more friends over if you want." And she was like, "No, not really." I was like, "Why?" And she was like, "Because I'm afraid when I'm ready for them to leave, they won't leave."
Yeah.
Right. And that's a very 5 thing. I don't
Yeah.
think she's a 4, but I think she's a very.
I feel like that's
strong
Tom.
5.
That sounds like Tommy.
Yeah. It's like, I need my space. I need my
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And I also don't want to, like, the idea of telling somebody to leave, like, terrifies me, because I don't like, that takes a lot of energy. Like, conflict takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So they basically like to observe from a distance. And they like to know, their fixation is like, they really want to know everything about everything.
Yeah.
But they also kind of hoard their resources. So their passion is like avarice, like they can be kind of stingy. So for them, their kind of way towards growth is real generosity and learning how to be generous with their time and their resources.
Yeah.
And that, which is very, like, all of these things, like the things that kind of bring people out of their fixations are things that are going to make them uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so learning how to be comfortable with discomfort, right?
Got it.
So, and that would make a 5 very uncomfortable. Then there's the 6. And the 6, again, is that type in the middle. So they repress their heads. They are...
Oh, I'm following you now. Okay. The middle types repress the body part. Whatever.
head
It's all
part,
your
or-
brain, but whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Right. So for the 6s, they're the loyalists, and their passion is fear or doubt. Like, they're just like, they're threat forecasters, and so they're constantly looking forward to see like what trouble may be ahead, so that they can plan and make sure that nothing bad happens.
Yeah.
They are trying to constantly kind of avoid danger, and they want very much to kind of, they're the loyalists because they want connection, they want community, and so they just want to avoid anything that is going to take them out of that space that will connect them to other people.
Yeah.
So
that's so interesting. I mean, that one in particular, I mean, it just, it takes all kinds, right? Is sort of but thinking about our last conversation and the way that we're all sort of interconnected in this like ecosystem. And I feel like it's trying to communicate that in a way, right? Like that the way that like our personality types are all sort of intertwined and interconnected. But like this one is one that's so clearly, like, you can see it, and from an evolutionary perspective, why is it? Why do you want somebody who's like, I need to figure out what all the threats are going to be so that it won't befall us, right?
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah. And so the other thing I didn't mention is, so on the circle, like the types that you're next to. So like for the 7s, we have on one side of us is a 6, and the other side is an 8, and so those would be your wings.
Yeah.
Right. And typically, we have like aspects of both of those types, both of our wings, we can kind of draw from those. But typically, there might be one that's stronger. So you might say I'm a 7 with a 6 wing. And I'm definitely a 7 with a 6 wing in that, like, this is the most 6 thing I ever did. When I was in college once, I had mono. So I was like laid up in bed for a week at my aunt's house or something.
Yeah.
And so I literally did this like thought experiment for like a week where I imagined something terrible happening to me in my future. Like I lose my eyesight. I lose the use of my legs. I can no longer talk. Something. I figured out like I projected some horrific thing happening to me.
Yeah.
And then but then the 7 part of me, because 7s are reframers.
Yeah.
But then I would kind of plan to myself, how can I be happy? How can I be okay in that living in that situation?
Right.
And so I just did this thought experiment, which is probably about the most like 7 wing 6 thing ever. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I can be fine. Anything tragic can befall me and I will be 100% fine, And so, yeah, that's the 6. And so for the 6 too, the thing is to face things that are scary, not because I've gotten rid of my fear, but in spite of my fear. I can still take a step into bravery even though I'm scared.
Yeah.
I don't have to get rid of that fear. I just need to like be brave in the face of fear.
Yeah.
So that's a 6. And then a 7. And this will explain for everybody what's going on in this podcast. The 7 is the enthusiast. And our passion is gluttony. And that doesn't mean just food, but it can be food. But it's like more is better. Like we want we want all the things. Like if hanging out with our friends is fun, hanging out with our friends and
like I want to start a commune and everybody lives together. I mean, I've proposed this idea already.
Yeah.
But yes, I know.
More. Yeah. Like going out to dinner is fine. Going out to dinner, but then I'm also going to another restaurant to get a dessert in another restaurant, and then going and like getting a cocktail at a bar after. Like that to me is like the greatest night ever.
Yeah.
Right. Like more.
Yeah.
And so our thing is like we want to avoid pain at all costs. Like the 9 wants to avoid conflict. The 7 wants to avoid pain. We want to be okay. We just want to be okay.
Yeah.
And so we're constantly planning the next great thing. So, and I don't know if you guys do this, but I am somebody who I will be on like the best vacation ever, and I'll still be planning my next vacation.
Yeah.
like
we have to do this again. That's more like that.
But next time we have to do it.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, I'll be like in Rome at the Colosseum, and I'll be like, next summer we should really go to Portugal.
Yeah.
Bill's like, can you be in the moment, please? And then it's also kind of difficult for us to see a problem because we are so avoidant of negativity. We reframe everything into the positive.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like I remember in one of our episodes, like you were like, I mean, I don't understand why people like get upset. Like you could just like figure this stuff out, like reframe it, like see what's good about it, like move forward, right? Because we are we're planners. Like that's our fixation, planning. So we're it's very hard for us to be in the moment and stay in that place of suffering long enough for us to be changed by that suffering.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That like what we were talking about in the last episode on like how do we be how can we become anti-fragile. We have to actually stay in the suffering for long enough to kind of build up some stamina.
Yeah.
Right? Because actually avoiding pain is pretty fragile.
So, and I take it that it's like emotional pain.
Yes.
Because I am not avoidant of like physical pain.
Mm-hmm. Well, because we love to be stimulated. So, I wish I had that. Like, I am not stimulated by physical activity very much. Like, I mean, there's some I can. Like, I love dancing, that's great.
I love dancing,
whatever. But no, like, I will avoid like running and stuff like that. But you love it. Like, you can't not do it.
I also earlier today, I go to this massage therapist that she does the thing where She walks, like uses her feet.
I love that.
And it's like the more, like it's the whole thing is pretty painful. Not the whole time, but like a fair part of it.
Yeah.
And like, it's like,
I like
I'm
that
doing
kind of
this
pain.
on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that kind of pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, running, exercising, like something that feels like intense is, I mean, and actually, in speaking of like anti-fragility, like that's a perfect example, right? Is like you stress your muscles and they get stronger over time, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But
your emotional,
or physical, like I probably have more capacity for emotional pain than I do physical pain.
Yeah.
But also I think that's something I've learned over the years too. Yeah. But like, for example, like with my kids, right? It was very difficult for me for a long time to see my kids in pain without wanting to fix it or change it, because it would make me so uncomfortable. The other thing is watching somebody else, like this was a big realization for me. Like I would get annoyed. Like I would get annoyed with like my husband if he was suffering, like if he was talking about something that was, this is a terrible situation and blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And I would like get frustrated. And I realized I would get frustrated because I was like, look, I have pushed this shit down, so that I can be happy. And you're not pushing it down. You need to push this shit down, And I was like, oh, okay, Kelley, that's not, that's actually not good.
Yeah.
It's also not good to like wallow in suffering
that's
either.
The thing that I always kind of wonder, like, where the balance is, right? Because like I'm not afraid to be upset or to feel upset, but I don't want to wallow in it for a long time. Yeah. It's like, okay, and for me, it's I do sort of try to transmit, I think, emotional pain to physical activity. Like if I am feeling sad or upset, it's like I want to go for a run, or I want to go, hit the punching bag or whatever, but just do something to kind of take that emotion and like transmit it physically. Yeah. I want to talk about it, whatever it is. Like I want to talk about whatever is upsetting to me, but I don't, once I've kind of gotten through it, like I don't want it to weigh on, it might still weigh on me. It might still be in my consciousness, but I don't want to move through the rest of my life feeling like sad about something. Sure. So I never quite know like what is the right balance here.
And you know what? So all the things you just said. So this idea, I don't want to feel like this forever. Well, of course we're not going to feel like this forever, right? Yeah. But that's what it feels like to us. Yeah. When we go into a sense of like overwhelm, and all of these things for each of these types, when they move into that place, that fixation or whatever, it's a space of overwhelm, and we feel like we're going to die. We feel like we're never going to be loved. We feel like all of our energy is going to be sapped. We feel like we're worthless, or and for us, we feel like we're going to live in this place of sadness forever. Yeah. Yeah. Like I know, and I even think that part of being an actor for me was a way to kind of experience some of those. Like I could live in a place of sadness in a very controlled environment that I knew would end. Yeah. And I know for myself, like I remember like I was getting ready to give a speech at this like retirement thing, and I was like, I'm going to cry. And my fear was I'm going to start crying and I'm not going to be able to stop. Mm-hmm. So I had to practice, and I had to like cry through the speech so that when I could actually do the speech, I knew I could
make it all the way through.
I could make it. Yeah. Because that's what we feel like. So the other thing that you said, like, where's the line, right? What's the balance? And that's, for the 7, that's the virtue. The virtue is sobriety or moderation. Mm-hmm. And so then the holy idea for the 7 is wisdom, is the wisdom to know what is moderation, right? Yeah. So, when does wallowing become too much, and when, or when are we, what are we cutting off, a healthy state of emotion
to be in like wisdom.
To be in wisdom.
To I actually wonder, we've talked about this before on the show, the Danny Kahneman Thinking Fast and Slow.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's almost like being able to be, I feel like sevens probably at default are fast thinkers. Maybe we all are. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what Danny Kahneman's kind of saying. But I feel like it's when, that's like who I am at my best, right,
Mm-hmm.
is when I can be in a place of like slower
Yes.
thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, which is a present moment space.
Yeah.
And that's what's really hard for us, right? So when we can slow down, be in the present moment, be in wisdom, and be present to what is happening, that's the healthy space for us. The one of the things that cause us pain is feeling us cut off from possibility. Right? We never want to be cut off from possibility. We want all options open to us all the time, right? One of the ways that shows up for me is like if I'm reading a really great book, I won't read the last 5 pages. Because as soon as I finish the book,
Yeah.
I can't read that book for the first time anymore.
Yeah.
And so like things ending to me, I think we've talked about this too.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
things ending for me is hard. This week, like
Yeah, your retirement. You're like deuces.
It's like actually it hasn't been as hard as I thought, but it might be. I mean, there might be a time,
down the road.
Down the road,
when you're,
I'm sure there will be. But yeah, like the last day, like when I was doing my spiritual direction program, like the last day, like we're on a Zoom call, like it's even a Zoom call because it was like the pandemic, and I was sitting there, like everybody was like, "Great, okay, I'll see you guys," And I was like bawling my head off. Like that was like the fear of like I could not, like I was ugly crying.
Yeah.
And because I was like, this is over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which it was very kind of irrational. It was a very irrational.
Yeah, it's interesting that it. Yeah, I mean, I definitely, that things ending is hard, or that next chapter. But I don't know. I feel like that's something I've gotten more wisdom of like that. I've just, now that I've had a lot of more chapters.
Yeah,
you're like, okay, this chapter is over, and it's okay that it's closed and that there's going to be a new one.
Yeah.
And
that's, for all of the types, we learn by just living, right? And being able to look back and just that awareness, right?
Yeah.
Learning how to be aware.
Yeah.
So that we can recognize, okay, that happened, and look, I didn't die.
Yeah.
And I'm okay.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll kind of leave you with that I think is a really kind of important part of this is, is this nature or is this nurture? And the understanding is that we are born with this kind of typology, with this personality type. Like it's in our DNA, it's stamped on us.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, we get this messaging, right? We get all kinds of messages from our parents, from culture, from friends.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is we filter those messages through our personality, through our ego structure, and it becomes confirmation bias. So we're not sevens because our parents made us sevens, right? And if you have kids, you know that these kids are different enough, are so different. Like they've been raised in such a way that they're, they shouldn't be this different.
But they
right?
are.
But they are.
Yep.
And so it's not that our parents, so they talk about like the childhood wounding, and that this type, this archetype kind of is what wraps around this kind of core wound.
Yeah.
But at the same time, even though there's this kind of wounding, we are as kind of responsible for our own wounding as like the messages that we received because we've kind of filtered it.
Yeah.
So nature and kind of nurture. Yeah. Which I think that's a really wise way of thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. That it's not, we don't have to go to therapy and blame our parents for everything.
No.
Just maybe a few things. Just because I know my kids will.
I doubt that.
Yeah.
I doubt that.
So that's a little toe dip.
I think that was more than a toe dip. That was a lot.
Okay.
I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of what's going on with this
Good.
Enneagram business.
Good. Yeah. So maybe I'll come back and we can talk about another aspect of it or deeper aspect of it. We could, next time we could talk about the instincts, the evolutionary kind of instincts, whether you're a self-preservation instinct, a subtype. These are subtypes, actually. So self-preservation, sexual or one-to-one, or social. And those kind of change like the dynamic of each of the types. So we can talk about that.
Yeah, that seems good. That seems like a good topic.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty interesting. All right.
Well, thanks for the education on Enneagram. This was fun.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon. Erin and I want to thank our listeners. Some of you have been with us since the very beginning. Some of you just joined us recently. Either way, thank you. Atheist grew faster than we expected in our first year, and that's because of all of you. Thanks for listening, subscribing, rating, and sharing our episodes.
We're still working to grow the show. Please keep sharing. We love our listeners and would love to hear from you. Reach out with questions, thoughts, or show suggestions to atheist@stlpodcast.com or check out our website, atheistpodcast.com.
Atheist is produced by Justin Seiwell and Trend Media STL.
Thank you for listening, and keep looking for connection.